Okay, well, hello everybody. My name is Karen Gaborik. I am Superintendent of the Fairbanks-North Shore Rural School District, and thank you so much for joining us today for this public Zoom and Facebook Live event regarding our school startup plan. Appreciate those of you who've been tuning in and are tuning in again this week, and if you're new to this format, I'll go through and do some presenting. Myself and actually Melanie Hadaway, our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, will spend some time presenting. If you have questions, drop those into the chat box, and then our Director of Communications, Yumi McCullough, is monitoring the chat box, and as she sees questions or topics trending, she'll let me know. And once we get to the question and answer portion of the presentation, we'll walk through those and answer as many questions as we possibly can. Also know, we're not usually able to get to every single question, but we collect every thing in the chat box, and then we send those to the different directors and schools if there are questions that are school specific, and just make sure that people know what questions are top of mind for folks. So in terms of where we're at with process, so if you've been following along, you know that we've had a core group of people, about 30 people. We've called it our Design Council, working all summer long to get ready for school this year. We started in May, June, in sort of the yellow-green zone, and we were very optimistic that that's where we'd be starting the school year. Then late June and into July, the cases in Alaska and in Fairbanks started to spike, and so basically shifted and started spending more time thinking about red. And not that we hadn't thought about red previously, but we'd spent a lot of our energy thinking about the yellow and the green zone, and being able to start school with students in buildings, start the school year with students in buildings. Last week, so let me back up a little bit. Also, in July, we were fortunate enough to have a medical advisory team join us in this work. And so there are members of Fairbanks Foundation Health Partners. Dr. Michelle Nace is the spokesperson for that group, and works directly with me and with others on my staff as needed, as we work through all the health and safety protocols and look at how things are progressing in the Fairbanks community. Also directly tied in with Dr. Olson, who is based out of Anchorage, and she is working directly with the Department of Education, the Alaska State Department of Education, and school districts around the state, as everybody works on their school startup plans. And so Dr. Nace and others in Fairbanks on that medical advisory team are also in direct contact with Dr. Olson. So last week, the board voted to start the school year fully engaged in remote learning, and to reevaluate that at regularly scheduled board meetings. And so that's what we've been preparing for. And as that design council process basically has come to an end, so that group met all summer long, and then we had parallel groups of representatives from across our employees. So we had support staff, and we had principals, and we had teachers, all also engaged in parallel groups, giving feedback to that design council team. So basically, that design council built sort of a paper model, an on-paper plan for what this would look like. That work ended last week, and now this week we have all of our building administrators, all of our school administrators are now with us, and we're spending an entire week with them getting ready for staff to return, meaning teachers and lots of our other support staff to return next week. And so now it's, what we built conceptually is now into the hands of schools, essentially. And so now school administrators, again, in coordination with the unions, with district program managers, and everybody who was involved previously, now looking at those designs and those plans, and really looking at, okay, what does this look like for our school? And so then next week, starting on Monday, August 10th, our certified staff come back. And again, another, huge layer of folks that will come back and then really dig in further. So we just continue to build the plan. We continue to add details to the plan as more and more people think about how these different pieces will work. The plan evolves and basically gets better day by day by day. And so I'll sort of have some touch points. I'll circle back on a few of those things as we go through our presentation. I just want to point out a couple things, again, a couple resources for folks if you're tracking what's going on at the state level, and then also want to show you some things on our website. So I'm going to do a screen share. And I just want to point out once again, this document. So this is the Alaska Smart Start, Restart, and Reentry Framework Guidance for schools across Alaska. And the reason I pointed it out is because it was just updated July 27th. And so this really has become quite the robust and helpful document. Dr. Olson took the previous work that was done, made sure it was all aligned to CDC guidelines, and really went through and clarified lots of things in this document. So I won't go through the all of it. If you are interested and you have time, you might want to read it, or you might want to go to a particular section that is of interest to you. Some things, like I'll point out, that might be useful. You've seen some of these charts and graphs before, but like here on page 8, if you're wondering, okay, what does this word cohorting mean? People talk about cohorting. So, you can find some of that information starting here. And then outbreak prevention and planning, and outbreak response. Again, so the basic text, the basic guidelines that school districts are following can be found there. Now, what we're doing as a district is taking that information and turning it into graphics and flyers and flowcharts and things like that that are easily consumable by the public. So, we're trying to put flowcharts up on our website where a parent can just go right there and say, okay, my child is having, flu-like symptoms. So what do I need to do? And so that you can really easily follow through that. And then of course, if you have questions, contact the school and get more information. So on that note, let me share my screen just one more time. And I want to show you the district website. So on the district website, we have our information that scrolls through right here at the front. So you can click here when this panel comes up, or you can go right to this yellow button right here and click School Startup. And we just continue to post more information behind all of these links. So School Start Guidelines, for example. So this has been recently completed and updated. So, if you just want to get a basic idea of the operational guidelines that schools will be following, you can find those things here, and maybe what some of the changes, you can expect this year. Another example, a lot of people now, just to back up, the risk level decision matrix. Again, if you're very interested in sort of how we're thinking about cases in Fairbanks and how that looks, remember that's one piece of the decision making that will go into whether or not we are in the red zone or the yellow zone or the green zone. And of course, those decisions will be made in direct coordination with our medical advisory team. In addition to cases, other things they'll be considering are hospital capacity, testing capacity, things like that. And then also another place people are interested in, of course, are the safety protocols. So you can find information here about safety protocols. And then, in school learning daily decision tree for students. So let me pop this up. This is, again, a new one. So for students, so again, just some questions, has a student traveled outside Alaska within the past 14 days? Yes, here's what you need to do. No, then, a couple more questions that you need to walk through. So these questions should not be unfamiliar to people. I'm guessing that many people are experiencing these very same kind of questions all around town with different businesses as, so, when I have a doctor's appointment, or I was at the DMV a couple weeks ago, I'm getting asked those questions as I go in the door. So those are the things that all of our staff will be thinking about as they come back, and then we want our families and students to think about as well. We're going to do a deep dive today into learning options so we can answer your questions directly from families about what those 3 learning options are for the start of the school year. So one thing I just want to clarify is that we are not in the red zone with regard to those, that medical risk zone right now. The school board did vote to start the school year fully engaged in remote learning. And so So basically how we're functioning is we're getting ready for a year where they're to start the year with no students in the building and to start just with staff. And there's some value in doing that. Again, I think I mentioned last week, you know, a lot of staff, a lot of people are really nervous about you know, what might happen with the cases, not just in Fairbanks, but in Alaska, across the country as schools start. So I think there's a lot of value in starting slowly, bringing all of our staff back, making sure that they are well versed in all the safety protocols, that they engage in those protocols themselves, that we've got good mechanisms around all of those, and then that we start thinking about when we're ready, how to bring students back into the building. Now, there's no definitive way yet that we might do that. So it could be that we take a phased approach and that we bring students back based on, you know, some priorities around, you know, perhaps our most at-risk students, you know, our students that are at highest need in terms of being in a building and having direct contact with teachers. It could also be that, you know, we get to a place where we're feeling pretty comfortable with the protocols, and I might make a recommendation to the board and say, you know what, I think we're ready to bring all of elementary back. So that's just one of, and I'm just using elementary as an example there. So that's just one example of how we're just going to have to walk our way through this kind of, you know, day by day, week by week, to see how we're all functioning in the buildings, in the district, and then just as a community health-wise and how that's going. So with that, I just want to remind folks, and then I'm going to turn it over to Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, Melanie Hadaway, who will provide more detail on this. Regardless of what zone we're in throughout the whole school year, we have 3 options for families. So we have the in-person blended learning option, we have the e-learning option, and then we have the district option for Fairbanks Best program, which is our homeschool program. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mel, and she will provide more details about those 3 options.
Dr. Gaborik, I know that there's a lot of confusion. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this will help a little bit. So really, as Dr. Gaborik said, we have three major learning options. And really for families, the first question is, do you want to have your child stay enrolled in their home school, or are you hoping for a different option? And so the first 2 options, that in-person blended and also the fully remote option, really are because a family wants to keep their child enrolled in their home school as much as possible. Best is our district homeschool. And really that's an option for families. And in that option, the parents become the teacher and the parents go to deliver curriculum. So in our 2 other options, we have that in-person blended, which really is for families who wish to go back to school if at all possible. So if schools are open and kids are in school, you would want to, and you want your child to be in school if possible, you would choose that in-person blended option. Now we are starting remotely, which means we're starting not in school. But again, as Dr. Gaborik said, the hope is that we're going to be able to get students back in there. If you were a family who really wants consistency, you know, in that remote option, that blended option, you may be in school for a few weeks and then something happens and we need to come out of school. In the e-learning option, it really is for those families who wish to stay. I don't want to have my child in the building for a quarter or for a semester. So really it's sort of a bigger choice. As you look at those specifically, you really see that for that blended remote option, again, the first question we're asking families is your intent to return to the school building if school is in session? And if so, the default is that blended remote learning option. Some schools are sending out a survey just to confirm with families that that's the choice they want, but really you don't need to tell your child's school. They're going to assign your student to a teacher just like they normally would, although we'll be starting sort of remotely. That's synchronous. There's sort of those daily live check-ins with your child's teacher. It's a teacher from the school who is teaching your child in that class. It's a combination of those synchronous learning with things that your child is doing offline as well. And it has standard grades, standard attendance, those kind of things. E-learning really are for those families that oftentimes if that they want something consistent. So that idea of being in school sometimes and maybe having to go into remote learning is just disruptive. And so you're really choosing that e-learning option. You have to register for that on the district website. Your schools are also, again, sending out some information around that. And although your child stays enrolled in the school, that's going to be a district-wide teacher who teaches those students. I've had lots of questions about, will that teacher be a teacher from my child's school? And really that's going to depend on how many students we have that are interested in that option, by grade level, and then we'll look for the best groupings of students. Whereas that in-school blended model really is teacher-created lessons using our district curriculum. In that e-learning model, it's much more independent. So at the high school level, we've actually had e-learning for many years. And we have a few different vendors who, with the support of teachers, district teachers who are grading some of that material, helping with the reteaching, connecting with students. At the elementary level, we're not sure yet what the curriculum actually will be. We have good resources here in the district that teachers have already been using our adopted materials, and we anticipate that will be the core for the e-learning at that point. The other question we get is, can I shift back and forth? We really are hoping that families, as much as possible, will ask the questions and have the conversations up first. So if you are in that blended remote learning and then school were to resume and you're really not comfortable, then of course we're going to want to work with you to make sure that your student can shift to that e-learning and help that student be as successful as possible. Really though, we would hope that those shifts would be at a quarter or a semester at some of those more natural sort of breaks. We've had lots of questions about special ed services, and I can tell you, and Mr. Coriel, who is our Executive Director of Special Education, can certainly answer specific questions. But our intent is, I think, to meet the needs of special ed students under each of those models. I know that the special ed department has been working really hard to figure out how to serve students based on their need. The other question on all these learning models is, what about a family with no connectivity? And if you really want that e-learning option, but you're not able to have connectivity, then as we work through that, we will talk with you about what's the best choice for your family. Are paper pencil packets going to be the best option? Can we, we've explored ways of using some devices where maybe we could download content. We're not exactly sure what that will look like, and it will vary by grade level and by the needs of the student. But really, if your family, if connectivity is an issue, reach out to your child's school, and we'll really do our best to make sure that we are able to ensure your child gets a robust education. I think the other piece is in that fully remote option, it's not the same. And so oftentimes families will say, what's going to be the most like my traditional experience? And that blended remote, if your goal, again, really is that you want your student back in school if possible, that blended remote option is that connection. And then if you're really wanting some consistency, register for the e-learning courses, and we'll help walk through that.
Okay, so thank you, Ms. Hadaway. I just want to maybe just circle back on a couple things. We know that in addition to consistency, so e-learning, again, would be a great choice for families who just don't want to deal with moving back and forth between yellow and red potentially throughout this semester, this school year. Again, you listen to Dr. Zink, you listen to our local medical advisor partners, and it's just unknown as kids come back to school, what the community transmission might look like. And so we're all going to do absolutely the best we can to mitigate any transmission, but we just don't know. And so if we may find ourselves moving to red and having to stay in red, and that might be a particular school, or that might be some feeder schools based on, siblings, whatever that contact tracing looks like, or as a whole district, we may need to move to red. So that e-learning option is something that stays very consistent. The in-school blended option is when, like Ms. Hadaway says, in yellow, in green, whenever we can have kids in school, I want my kid in school. And I recognize that there might be times when my kid isn't in school because we're in a red situation. And then also adding to that, just a remote start to the year, which is giving us a little bit more time to get prepared. So just wanted to point out too, parents that want that e-learning option, we're asking you to make that choice by this Friday. August 7th, because schools really need that information then to help organize teachers and schedules and all those things. So if you're thinking you want the e-learning option, please call the school or the teaching and learning department if you have questions. And then if you can make that selection by August 7th, that would be really great for us in terms of planning.
Hi, we're going to go ahead and switch interpreters.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so I think with that, we'll turn to questions. Again, we're going to try to give lots of time for questions today. And so what does remote kindergarten look like? So Ms. Hadaway, can you speak to that a little bit?
You know, I will preface this by saying I am not an elementary teacher. I was a secondary teacher, but I know that this summer we had a really nice run through for our kindergarten remote learning, and we ran a program called Ready Raven, which is a kindergarten readiness program, and really had good luck with our kindergarten teachers, you know, engaging synchronously with the class, giving families activities to be able to do, and then having a lot of that offline that time as well. You know, the specifics in terms of what times will they have to log on or how frequently, a lot of those decisions will be made at the school level. We have provided schools with guidance around what's appropriate by grade band. So for example, a high school student can spend more time online synchronously with their teacher than we would expect a kindergartner with a smaller attention span and the need to break up material more into smaller chunks.
Okay. Let's see, if parents told their homeschool their choice, do they also need to tell the districts? No, actually we've shifted all that communication to your attendance area school. So if you've let your school know, we've got mechanisms in place to you know, be sure we're communicating and keeping those lists up to date. So thank you so much for asking that. And also, if you had previously last week let the district know that we have shared that with all of our schools administrators. You may be getting a call to confirm. Again, now you know that you maybe, you know, we've been able to explain the different options to say, just want to confirm what your choice is. And so thank you for asking that. Will cohorts be used when in-person school is an option? If so, will the students get their schedule before school begins? So yes, we have to use cohorts. So again, if you kind of go through those guidelines, the recommendation is not just, you know, for cohorts, but pretty small cohorts of students that are consistent. And I think they use the language the same every single day. So that's a key piece. So prior to the updates, this is one of those situations where the update provides more clarity and information. Prior to the update, elementary schools had a particular size that they were looking at of those cohorts. They're going to look at those guidelines again and see if they might need to reduce the size of those cohorts. At the secondary level, the cohorts are particularly challenging for in-school attendance, and so our secondary principals right now are working on revisions and updates to their plans. And I think the second part of that question was, what was the second part of that question? I'm sorry, I missed it. It was, oh, will schedules be given ahead of time? Yes, so that definitely would be the intent. And so if you're thinking again that you want that in-person option, you know, we're starting remote night now, but whenever possible, you want your kids in schools. We have those sample schedules up on the website. So elementary, remember the goal is to have kids in school 5 days a week for 5 hours a day, if at all possible. And so that's the goal. For secondary, we had the A/B cohort models. And so again, once we know which option parents want, then each school will be able to work out their schedules. Again, elementary should be a little bit more straightforward in terms of, you know, if we can get all the kids in the school. Secondary, you know, what those cohorts look like or how that looks over the course of the week. So, okay, another question. Are the students going to be able to do the CNA program this semester in blended? And correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Hadaway, but I believe we've had to cancel that program. It's in coordination with the university, and that is just not one that we're not going to be able to offer this semester, I believe.
That is correct.
So
At this point, we've rolled over those students who were accepted and planning to take that into the fall, or into the spring. And we're really hopeful that we're going to be able to have the pieces in place to be able to resume that in the spring.
Okay. For kids that have a cold and can't go to school, will there be a Zoom camera on the teacher so that kids can continue to participate? And so I know a lot of our teachers, after experiencing last spring, have been working on things like that. You know, how can I make sort of that, you know, that classroom touch-based experience and that in-blended remote environment even higher quality. So I'll ask Ms. Hadaway if she knows of any other pieces that teachers are working on in terms of that.
You know, I think to answer the question directly, I don't know that we're going to ask teachers to live stream their entire class every day. So all of those Zoom pieces. So they're definitely, you know, so when we are in that, I'm assuming that the question is, if we're in school and a child is sick, will we live stream their class? And I don't know that we're going that direction. But I am hopeful that because teachers are prepared for that switch between in-person learning and remote learning, that the materials, the things that a student would need to stay caught up in that class or to keep up with what the class is working on should be more accessible this year than they have been in years past.
One thing we know is that we're really going to have to work closely with families to accommodate students. So again, for all those students in that in-person blended learning option, when we're in school, so to the question, we might have kids who get sick or through contact tracing have to be quarantined. We also have military families who have a mandatory, my understanding, most recent understanding is a mandatory 14-day quarantine. And so, you know, again, we don't want kids sitting at home for 14 days doing nothing. We want to stay connected with them and keep them engaged. And again, not just engaged, but receiving instruction and you know, keeping up with assignments and things like that. So we'll want to be really sensitive to that as, you know, again, it won't just be kids who will be impacted by this, it might be staff as well. So again, we will do the best we can to mitigate that with our safety protocols, but just to be ready for it. Can high school students do a combination of in-person and e-learning, Ms. Hadaway?
So we have actually had students who have done partial e-learning at the high school level. And so we're anticipating that we'll continue to have those where some of their classes are e-learning classes and some of their classes are teacher-directed classes in that blended model. At the elementary and the middle school, it'll be a little bit different, kind of depending on sort of what those requests are. We know, for example, music is one, orchestra is really hard to do through e-learning. So we may have students who are enrolled in e-learning, but hoping to participate in orchestra if that's an option at their school.
I think our families who've experienced e-learning prior to this, right, we have e-learning for a number of years, are kind of used to choosing some of these options. So it's in a way, we're just expanding options that have been available at the high school to across the district now, so. Let's see, e-learning, are those classes designed by the teacher or canned curriculum, and will they have access to a real life teacher?
So it will be a combination of both. So at the secondary level, we've had a couple of different vendors that we've used. We sort of have been looking and evaluating some different curriculum. There is a district teacher assigned to every class. So even if that teacher is using some purchased curriculum or a purchased class, there still are teacher-created, teacher-graded lessons, discussions that are facilitated by the teacher. The teacher is available for assistance, and the teacher actually gives the grade. At our elementary level, you know, we have access again to purchase curriculum that our teachers use even, you know, in a more traditional school. Think Central is our elementary language arts program that has a very robust online component. So it won't all necessarily be teacher created materials. A lot of that will just depend on the needs of the students and also the teachers that we end up in those programs as well.
So with the e-learning option for a 7th grade student, would that student have multiple teachers, one for math, one for English, etc.?
Yes.
Again, and we still have to comply, which makes sense, of course, with certifications and things like that. So, you know, we want to match the right teacher with the right content and the right grade level. So.
Right. Our goal really is to make sure that students in e-learning are able to get the curriculum and the standards that they need to be able to progress to the next level. And so even with the current e-learning, as Dr. Gaborik has talked about, that we've had at the high school, and we've had some math courses at the middle school level, you know, we want to make sure that the teacher and the district teacher attached to that knows their subject area, knows the curriculum, knows what students will need at the next level, and can make sure that those essential competencies are able to be covered so the student will be successful, you know, whatever next year brings.
So is middle school using the same e-learning model as high school with Apex and Fuel Ed, almost all asynchronous on their own time frame?
So we're not sure. We've looked at several different vendors and possibilities for support at middle school, including the Alaska Statewide Virtual System, which is a relatively new option for us here in Alaska. So we are anticipating that a lot of that will be independent asynchronous work. You know, we also know that middle schoolers are middle schoolers, and so we will anticipate frequent check-ins, you know, some perhaps not whole group, but you know, a teacher checking in frequently with a student and monitoring their progress, perhaps creating some small group tutorials and making sure that there's access for teachers, for students as well. What we have learned even from our existing e-learning is that you don't just put a kid on a computer and then check in with them at the end of the semester. They really need ongoing support. They need ongoing check-ins. They need to know who do they ask for help. And so we're really committed to making sure we maintain that in our e-learning programs.
This next question, I'm actually going to ask Kate LaPlante to respond to. Kate LaPlante is our assistant superintendent who supervises elementary schools. So Ms. LaPlante, in the blended in-person model, how many students will be in a K2 class? And then I would maybe expand that to, you know, also a K2 cohort.
Sure. So in most of the schools, when we did social distancing and we actually went into schools in the summertime and tried it out with desks and measuring tapes and spaced it all out, we could get about 16 students into most classrooms with social distancing and all that. So that's kind of our average for who can be in a learning space together. Now, depending on the grade level, that we might want to create learning pods of more like 12 or 13 for a kindergarten or a first grade class, maybe upwards to 15 or 16 for a fourth or fifth grade class, knowing that that learning pod needs to stay pretty stable throughout the week. The goal here is that the learning pod, the students stay together and they don't move around the building and remix with other learning pods. They might be under a homeroom teacher who goes between two learning pods. And so that classroom teacher might be serving 25 kids, a group of 12 and a group of 13, as they would normally serve 25 kids as a class of third graders. So it's a little bit of how are we in person or are we virtual, and are we assigned to a homeroom teacher, and then, you know, do we see that homeroom teacher in person a portion of each day? So
thank you so much. And then again, really important, staff will be able to start organizing all of that after they get the data from this Friday. So once we know, again, how many families want that e-learning option, how many want that in-person blended option, then they'll start really digging into you know, numbers and kids and grade levels and content areas and really fleshing all that out. So more to come in the next couple of weeks. And I think we'll be able to, you know, add to this so parents have a pretty clear idea of what things will look like.
I apologize for the interruption. We're going to do another interpreter switch.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Will those e-learning students be able to take band or orchestra? And if it's not offered via e-learning, can they join remotely with their home schools? And so remotely while we're in remote, and then in person when we go to in person?
Yes, that's the intent. You know, even right now, our students who take our best homeschool, maybe some of them take 1 or 2 classes at their home school. And so our hope is that with e-learning, if for some of those specials or those electives that just really aren't able to be offered in e-learning, that we can try to make those accessible for families.
One thing our music and PE teachers will be spending time on, and I know many of them are thinking about this already, is the social distancing and you know, the cohort, and then also sort of mask guidelines are really specific around PE and music. So they'll be, again, thinking about their spaces and their activities really carefully. So again, if you're kind of interested in some of those things in that Smart Start guidance, you can see some of the things that they'll be thinking about. And then of course, sort of the foundational document for all of this, and it's not just one document, but is the CDC guidelines. And so there's tons of information if parents are really interested in digging in around that. What type of schedule will e-learning utilize? So I'll start to answer this question. Our school principals just yesterday really started digging into this and putting together e-learning schedules with recommendations in terms of the amount of time that teachers would spend with students. We should have that up on our website pretty soon, and I'll turn it over to Mel for more.
So just a clarification. So our principals have really dug into sort of what I would say is that remote learning. So that blended and in-person, for students who would choose that in-person option, should we be in school, teachers and principals are really looking at what would that schedule look like for those families when they're home. And we provided some guidance by grade band of here's how much time is sort of appropriate for families. So they may log in at the elementary level for a morning meeting for 10 or 15 minutes and then work offline, doing activities or explorations, and then come back together later on for a check-in. For our in-person blended, even though we're in a fully remote, we really are looking at an established schedule. So at the high school, I believe, they were looking at sort of a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, where students are actually checking in according to the class periods and the school schedule, with some time on Wednesday for small groups. At the middle school, sort of following the established school schedule, the same schedule they would have while they were in school. Again, not with every single minute of that time being online, because we know that that's just not, it's not effective for a student to be online for 5 hours a day. The e-learning students really will be at the schedule of the family. We'll have supports available. The e-learning teachers and the supports will have established office hour times and some open support times. But e-learning really is designed to be mostly independent and more asynchronous as opposed to that blended learning model.
Okay. Lots of questions again. We did this section previously this morning with staff. So lots of questions again about special education and students with IEPs. And we know that many of those questions are very specific to programs and schools, but perhaps I'll ask Derek Coriel, our Executive Director of Special Education, to just give a general idea to parents about what the plans in place for special education.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Gaborik. I'm just going to give a broad overview because, like you said, like there's so many unique situations and so many moving parts. But we've been doing a great deal of work trying to improve especially our remote services from the spring. So just a few things I'll tell you is we have an FAQ that will be up on the website based on kind of the things that have happened in the last week. That will be up on the website hopefully as early as this afternoon. If not, it'll be there by tomorrow morning. And if you're looking at our website, excuse me, under the parent resources, I would ask you to just look at the parent learning opportunities. We have a lot of trainings going on. We have a partnership with Stone Soup, and we are going to continue those trainings. We also would like your input on any training you need to help support your student, whether we're remote or going back and forth between schools. So a few of the questions that I saw, I'll just be quick. Evaluations are going on now. We have a pretty big backlog, but those will continue. So if your student was in the middle of an evaluation, then that will be completed. We have purchased some digital evaluation tools, which so we can do a lot of these evaluations, even if either with social distancing or fully remote. So that's a new thing that we're able to do as well. So those evaluations will continue. Preschool services will go on. Again, it's going to be of course, it's going to be a challenge if when we're in remote, but we are again working on a lot of things, including we've bought a number of platforms to support teachers and paraprofessionals who are working remote. We have purchased paraprofessionals in our department. Will have a device that will be dedicated to them, and we will also give training on using the devices and using those programs we purchased to help support both staff and students. Let's see, what else did I miss? Let's see, we have plans going for every stage. And I think one thing we'll talk about, I know this will be coming up in the near future, is when we get to the point where we're talking about the opportunity to bring students back. We're looking at prioritization of students. And again, there are other groups, including federal programs, who will be looking at their prioritization of students as well. But for us, we're starting with students who cannot benefit from remote learning or have very great difficulty doing that in a meaningful way. And also students with significant and severe behavioral challenges or working on the most critical life skills. But at the same time, what will they be doing we're doing it now, and then as teachers join us and paraprofessionals join us, is working on protocols to make sure that we can mitigate every factor we can come up with to keep both students and staff safe. ELP I see is coming up. ELP is, there is a robust plan for ELP. ELP services will continue. We have a learning plan with the state, so we would do it anyway, but we're required to provide those services, and we will. So there will be, ELP teachers will be, when they get back, they'll meet with our assistant director, Kate Hall, who's over the ELP program, and they will be starting to push information out about how that's going to be delivered. But ELP services 100% will continue as well. And I'm sorry if I missed anything as far as questions. What I would do is encourage you is look at the FAQs on our website, look at the parent learning opportunities. We have a who to contact in our department webpage. So if your student is in a particular program or has specific needs, you're welcome to call our office at any time. I also encourage you on the beginning on the 10th to start talking to your case managers for more specific information. So again, we are open to any questions, so please don't hesitate to call the special education office.
Thank you, Derek. Okay, another question about the blended remote model, the in-person blended model. How about apps and Google Classroom? Are the schools utilizing one type, or will it be up to the teacher, Ms. Hadaway?
So we got really loud and clear feedback from the community, from parents, from teachers last spring that there was a lot to manage. And so as a district, we've asked teachers to utilize a platform called Seesaw for our younger grades, really in kindergarten through second grade. And then from third grade up, our teachers have been asked to use Google Classroom. And we do have some students some teachers at the high school who are using PowerSchool Learning, which is a platform that's attached to our PowerSchool system that allows teachers to deliver content. So we're really hoping that it's easier for parents that kids are on some centralized platforms. The other thing that we're going to ask teachers to do is really make sure to very explicitly communicate to parents, to students, what the expectations are, what apps or what additional information might be used. We do have parent resources, parent tech resources that are on our teaching and learning page on the website, and we're going to keep updating that so that parents have a one-stop shop to be able to find answers. What if my kid has forgotten their password, or how do I change a password? We utilize something called ClassLink, which really is where we're also hoping will help because it centralizes access for kids and families. They can go through ClassLink and then they have access to all of their assigned content as opposed to having to go to a bunch of different places.
Okay, thank you. When schools are open to on-site classes, will the hours for students remain the same as they have been? Okay, great question. We are going to circle back with the school board. I hope, if not at the next board meeting, they're having regular updates. So next Monday, the 10th, shortly after that. So in the near future, because more conversation to be had around that. So before we shifted to, planning for remote learning, what the schedule that we had developed, basically, we had a 3-tier start system and we collapsed that to a 2-tier system. And the reason for that is a couple reasons. One of them is about transportation. And so when we're able to get schools up and running, now a lot of this will depend again on the choices families make and how many kids we have, but given just basic information that we have right now, we need to go to a 2-tier system in order to accomplish social distancing on the buses. And so, to do that, we're talking about students, one student per seat, every other seat, students from the same family being able to sit together. But you can imagine just like that really changing what classrooms and schools look like, that also really changes what buses look like and how many kids you can put on the bus. Many, many fewer kids can go on each bus. And so then you have to change your whole schedule. So if we continue with that plan, then yes, start times and end times for schools might change. On the website, we have those sample schedules that we built and what that would look like. The other piece that contributes to that, it's kind of like everybody keeps talking about the Rubik's Cubes with 3,000 sides. The other piece that contributes to that is we were really working with the unions to provide all of our educators for more time each day to plan and collaborate as we move through the school year with a global pandemic. And so again, in order to do that and to create more time for them, that was one of the pieces that impacted sort of how the school day itself lays out, and then how that works with transportation. So, but I will say more information to come, and so stay tuned. Are we doing a switch?
Yes, we're switching interpreters, yes.
Thank you, perfect. Let's see, will the district consider opening certain schools in person, or will all schools open and close in Unity? So kind of based on where we're at right now, again, we could have a couple of different possibilities. It could be that we phase students in, again, sort of looking at priorities and student needs. If we're feeling super confident in a couple of weeks, I may be able to, recommend to the board, okay, let's bring back, again, I just keep using, let's bring back all of elementary. Like, I think we're ready. So, we're just gonna have to, like I said, sort of walk our way through this and see how it goes. Now, let's say we're in yellow and there's a reason to move to red. So again, there's different scenarios. It could be one school is impacted, and maybe it's not even a whole school. Maybe it's a few classrooms or a grade level, right? Just based on what that contact tracing looks like. Maybe it is an entire school. Maybe it's a couple schools because we've got siblings in different schools, or, we have a staff person who works in one school, but they have kids in other schools. So there's lots of different possibilities about how we might move to red. The hope would be that we only move the classes or the grade levels or the section of the building or the schools that we need to move to red in those hotspot sort of instances. On a wider community level, if our medical advisor team says, hey, just across the borough, we're at much higher risk and we need to move to red, then we, again, could potentially move the entire district to red, stay there as long, again, as it makes sense in, close coordination with our medical advisors, and then move back into yellow. We know that it takes time for everybody to make those transitions. And so the move into red could potentially be overnight, right? Again, if you get a positive case and public health does contact tracing and it determines you need to, close the school right now so that we can do deep cleaning and things like that, that might be overnight, and we're calling families and letting them know. Moving back into yellow, again, we know, so let's say on Wednesday, it's like, all right, things are good. We might say, okay, so on Monday, we're going to move back into yellow. So already this situation, may create some back and forth movement. And so my goal will be to mitigate that and, try to take out some of the lurchiness. I know that's not a very technical term, but, some of the lurches that we might experience. And again, we'll just have to, go through this as a community and find our way through this. And right now, we're guessing what that could potentially look like, right? And so as we have some of these experiences, we'll be more informed. As we watch other school districts, again, you're very aware of what's going around, what's happening across the state, communities where the case levels are high and some of those decisions that are being made. And so we'll watch that closely. And as always, school districts that start much earlier than we do, sometimes in the lower 48, watching those very closely and learning from, our partners all across the nation. So is there any plan to distribute non-digital materials for elementary students in e-learning? Ms. Hadaway, what are your thoughts about that?
I think that for those, I think there's two sort of parts to that question. One is, will students have options to do things that aren't online? And the answer is yes. So we're going to want to make sure that students have learning materials to be able to, engage in things that aren't just sitting in front of a screen. That can look a lot of different ways, and again, figuring out materials. And I know that some elementary teachers have talked this summer about how do they utilize sort of those common things at home that students can use in terms of engaging and learning. And I saw a great check sheet. It was, find 7 things in your house that have 6 sides, and how does that figure out the area and the perimeter, and really looking for some things that engage students without technology. The other part of that is for those students who just don't have access, who either don't have connectivity or don't have devices, then we really want to make sure we work with those families to figure out what's going to be the best way to meet those students' needs. So it may be paper pencil packets. It may be, just putting some some information on a thumb drive, and for those who perhaps have a device but not connectivity, and really making sure we work. So I encourage those families under either of those options, whether they really want an e-learning option, they know they don't want to go back to school, but they don't have connectivity, then we'll reach out as we confirm their e-learning choice and see how do we come up with a solution for that family.
Okay, thank you. On blended learning, will the elementary school child have to log in at certain times?
Do you want to take that one, Ms. LaPlante?
I had to find the unmute. So yes, and yes, there will be times that students want to join their class and be part of the online class and that community building. And there will be times when they are doing something that is can be scheduled into their day at their own time, just like we assign homework and maybe a third grade student is doing a math worksheet, or a fifth grade student reads a chapter in preparation for tomorrow's social studies conversation. There is definitely high-tech and low-tech things that students would do at their own time. And then there's also times that they would really want to benefit and participate with their peers, with their class. We recognize that you know, teachers need to create flexible content for students. So I might be able to sign on and do something with the classroom teacher, have a math lesson. It might also be helpful for me to be able to circle back later on in the day when I'm doing that math assignment and go like, what was that direction? And be able to find a 5-minute tutorial from the teacher, or one that they've recommended that I watch from our online resources, so that I can remind myself how to do that. So there will be support both for synchronous, which means we're doing it together, supports, and asynchronous when I'm doing it on my own, and then we're looking at high-tech and low-tech options.
Right, thank you.
And if I could just add one thing, Dr. Gaborik. So, you know, I think what Ms. LaPlante talked about was a good example of why we call that option the blended option, and not just in-person school. So the hope really is that even when students are back physically in the building, that teachers are continuing to use some of those technology tools, so that students really are supported, so that they're not losing time between learning in school and then having to shift to remote. So that blended means that some of those tech tools that students are using in the remote learning will still be happening in the in-person as well, just perhaps more under the guidance of a teacher or within the classroom.
Okay. How will proctored testing be handled for e-learning?
So that is a challenge that we actually were just talking about with some of our existing e-learning teachers right now. And so I will say that we don't have a 100% answer for that. You know, we know that with e-learning especially, the tests are part of, well, and even with traditional learning in our remote system, those tests, you know, I think about as a high school teacher, the big finals and quarter unit exams and some of those things. So figuring out some secure ways to be able to give those to students is something that we're still working on.
Will the e-learning class options at the high school level be the same as potential in-person classes? So for example, if a student registered for a first aid course, would that also be available by e-learning?
So all of our core classes will be available in e-learning. So their math classes, their English classes, however, not all of the classes, the elective courses that we're able to offer in person will be able to be offered through e-learning.
Okay, so first aid course might be one of those that is not available via e-learning. That very
right.
It might be
right.
Okay.
And even some of those specialized CTE courses are a great example of having to work through what that even looks like in remote learning. So some of our health science classes that have a practicum where you have to actually demonstrate skills, you have to show that you know CPR, are a little bit more challenging to do in a COVID environment. So so we've really had to work with even, you know, teachers of some of those courses to look at our in-person options to make sure that those are ones that we have a backup plan for if we have to be fully remote.
Yeah, and you know, as we've talked to, again, career technical education teachers, you know, specifically, so I'm going to focus on high school students, you know, for that cohorted model, they're in schools for a couple days and they're at home for a couple days. So really taking advantage of the time they're in school for those hands-on activities. Again, of course, you know, making sure we're social distancing and all that. The challenge will be is when we shift to red, right? You know, so what does that look like and how long are we in red? or in our current, remote, or I should say, and in our current remote startup situation. So again, once we get to the place where we can have students in the building, hopefully we're still gonna have to really, things will look very different in that red zone than they do in yellow. So let's see, where are we at here? Will e-learning at the elementary level have any kind of class cohort, or will it be entirely individual?
We're not sure yet what those groupings will look like, and that will depend largely on how many students and the grade levels of the students are interested. I think we're all committed to having students have as much connection as they can to schools and to each other, even during the closure. So I am hopeful and would anticipate that, yes, our elementary students, may have some, will have time to connect with other students. It may not be the same as in a classroom-based model where you have a whole bunch of third graders. But we hope to create those connections for students.
So that'll be something, again, after we get, hopefully a really good look after Friday at which families and, specifically which students, which schools are making that e-learning selection, then schools can start organizing around that and figure out the best way to schedule all of those things. How much parent involvement besides motivation to complete is needed in e-learning?
As the parent of 3 children, I would say that's gonna depend largely on your child. We really, the e-learning model that we're really embracing is that the teachers who are assigned to teaching those e-learning classes, we hope really will be monitoring students, checking in with them, so that we can notice if a student's motivation is lacking, or they need to have some other ways of being engaged. But it really, e-learning really is designed to be pretty independent, at the times that work for students or the times that work for families. So, so it's I would say would sort of depend on your kiddo and how engaged they choose to be.
Okay, a question about devices. How does one go about checking out a device, and when will that happen? So again, once we know which option everybody is choosing, and recognizing that both of those options, if everybody is at home, requires devices, then schools will put together schedules to check out devices to students. And also we did quite a bit of work, and we'll continue to touch base with families. Some of our families, especially after last spring and having experienced that, felt good about the devices they had. Have different needs around that. Other families realized, oh my gosh, what I thought was going to work isn't working. I need another device, or maybe I need 2. And again, so we got the whole range. So we'll really work with families in terms of getting those devices out. We have more devices coming in. Again, the whole country is ordering devices. So we have some now, we have more coming in. And so we'll try to, again, work with families and prioritize around that. Families that feel like they're pretty well set up with devices, we'll probably say, hey, can you wait just a little bit, and use what you have. Families that just don't have anything, we'll try to be sure that they get devices. So, can you change your mind on the learning option if you already chose?
Yes. We really are hoping that by the 7th, which is Friday, families are sort of committing to where they want to be starting school on the 20th. And for the families that registered for e-learning, as we get teachers and as schools reach out, there'll be outreach to sort of confirm that that's their choice. So between now and August 20th, there's always room for families, but we really are hoping that they commit at least so we can start doing some initial planning. We hope that once we're into the start of school, that families will choose what I consider the natural breaks, shifting at a quarter, shifting at a semester. But I would say that even with students who start e-learning in I hate to say our normal or traditional sort of sense, if it's not working for a student, we don't want to tell a student you have to sit 18 weeks in a class that's not working for you. So it'll be important to have that communication, and then we'll shift if we have to. And some of those transitions, depending on the grade level and the types of courses a student might be taking, will be easier than others.
And sort of parallel to learning options, we know families will be in different places. They already are in very different places with regard to personal health and safety issues. So whether it's their student, whether it's a parent at home or somebody else at home, again, all of those factors are weighing in, and those factors may change as well as we all experience this school year. So we want to be sensitive to families' needs. We also just need to recognize that you know, like moving in between zones, flipping back and forth between learning options, you know, often is, well, it is disruptive for, you know, kids and students. So if we need to make a shift and, you know, so hopefully we get students on the right path as early as possible in a mode that works for them. Let's see, oh, 1 minute left. Okay, so we'll do one more question. Will there be periodic surveys or a place where parents can give feedback after a quarter semester so that if this continues, we can help you tweak? Oh my gosh, please, I love this question. Thank you. Yes, yes, absolutely. So we were just actually sort of working on that last week. So regular surveys, again, some real natural breakpoints seem to be like at quarter and at semester. We may do one again, knowing that this is also new to all of us, like mid first quarter. And I mean, any feedback we can get from families, and if we can quantify that in the form of a survey and you know, ask some really specific questions, yes, no, is this working, is this not, you know, list of options, what do you need? Then that helps us, you know, analyze the data very easily. So thank you for that question. And yes, we want feedback. Don't wait for the survey. You know, again, stay connected with your teachers, stay connected with your school administrators. While you're waiting for school to, for teachers to come back, you know, again, contact your school administrators, contact teaching and learning. And we really want to, you know, we've had our teaching and learning staff just spending time with families, just walking through each one of these options and really saying, okay, you know, this child, this age, what do you think? This child, this age, what do you think? And so we want to provide as much of that personalized service as we can. So stay connected with us and we'll do everything to help our families choose the right option for them. And then if we need to shift, we'll shift. So thank you so much for everybody for joining today. With parents, I plan on doing more of these because, again, as we know, we continue to build this model. It'll get more and more robust. And so we'll send out another update. I don't know exactly when the next one will be. I'm going to give school administrators this week to really dig in and do some planning. And then we'll get all of our certified staff and, you know, the rest of our staff start coming on next week. And then probably another update like this before school starts for families. So thank you. Really appreciate all of you. And I look forward to engaging with you on one of these events again in the near future. So enjoy the rest of your day.